Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Just Listen to Yourself podcast with Davis. I am your host, Davis. Thank you for joining us right here on the FCB radio network. Of course, if you're a new listener, then maybe you haven't heard that this is a podcast where I ask people to take their talking points about popular hot button issues and draw them out to their logical conclusion. So it's a thought exercise. It's an exercise in persuasion, discussion. We've done a number of interesting subjects. Last week I did marriage, and I've got a bonus episode that I'm going to post because the response to that episode was overwhelming in a positive way. But I got one email that was particularly moving, and I wanted to share it with you. So I'm going to do it in a bonus episode. Stay tuned to this station, to this podcast, to hear more about that. But today I want to talk about climate change. Yes, I've been threatening to do this episode for a while, but I wanted to make sure I had all my thoughts in order. I wanted to make sure I caught up on my reading and knew what I was talking about. You guys know I don't like to hit you with too many boring, like article quotes and charts and facts and figures. This is an exercise in persuasion and thought, but that doesn't mean I don't have to know what I'm talking about. So just wanted to make sure that I was up to speed on everything and that I thought through my own arguments. But I want to make the argument today that I don't think we should be as worried about climate change as some people in this country and across the globe want us to be. And I think that there is a big miscommunication between climate activists and those who are labeled climate deniers that really gets in the way of us having even a productive or normal discussion around it. I'd like to start out by saying that I think it's wrong to label people who don't believe that the climate is about to kill us any day as deniers. In fact, I don't really know anybody on this side of the fence, on my side of the fence on this issue, who denies that the climate is changing. And that would really be silly. You don't even need science to know that, because you can look at where you live and know that 10, 20 years ago, the weather was different around you. The climate was different around you. And we hear our politicians say it all the time, right? I live in California, and just a couple of years ago, our governor, Jerry Brown, was like, this is the new normal, forest fires and drought. And of course, we came out of that. Now we're in the rainiest period in California history, but I'll get to that later. My point is that even our activists and politicians recognize that the climate has changed. And we recognize that they are right when we respond to them. The climate has changed. That doesn't mean that it's not supposed to change. Again, I point to how we all have learned in our elementary school classes that the climate was very different 10,000 years ago, or 20,000 or 40,000, whenever there were no people, whenever there was no industry. It was warmer or it was colder. We know that the earth has changed over the years, and the earth continues to change. So I want to put that part of this argument to rest. There is no doubt that the climate is changing. I don't think most people who don't want to sign on to the current climate agenda are deniers. I think they're saying something different, and I'm going to tell you what they're saying. And I'm really addressing people who I think are concerned about the climate and are wondering why people like me aren't sharing their concern, or seemingly aren't sharing their concern. So if that's you, I hope this podcast gives you some food for thought, at least. So I'm going to lay out some of the talking points on the climate issue and tell you why I think that we can come to compromise on this, and we don't necessarily have to be labeling each other baby Hitlers because we're not signing on to each other's agendas. So let's get started, because you guys know I like to start at the start. Climate change, or global warming, or the ice age, or whatever it's called. Listen, I was raised by a hippie environmentalist, a liberal hippie environmentalist. My mom is still a huge environmentalist, a huge activist for the environment. She always will be. And that's how she raised me to think. And in our house, we did everything we could to live sustainably. We didn't use certain products that could be harmful to the environment. We were always very aware of what was going on in environmental politics and policies. I spent a lot of time with my mom watching the news and reading articles on stuff that was going on around the globe. So I remember back when I was a kid, I mean, I'm 45 years old now. So we're talking late 70s, early 80s. I can remember all the way back then that climate change wasn't climate change, and it wasn't even global warming at that time. At that time, we were coming into the next ice age. That was the big thing. It's going to be the next ice age. I can clearly remember, I don't know why this sticks in my head so much, but I can clearly remember Ted Danson doing some kind of TV program or interview or documentary and watching him on TV, because we all loved Ted Danson back then because he was on Cheers, he was Sam. I can remember watching him tell me, look, we've got 20 years to solve this problem or the next ice age is going to hit. And we're going to be hit hard and we may not survive it. I clearly remember that. So it wasn't always climate change, and it wasn't even always global warming. And then what happened is we started to switch to some other issues like, well, it's not necessarily going to be an ice age, but we really need to worry about the hole in the ozone layer. I was never allowed to have aerosol hairspray or aerosol products, because we were told by guys like Ted Danson and the articles we would read in the media that that was causing this hole in the ozone layer, which was going to expose the Arctic to harmful UV rays. All of the ice caps would melt, and then, we'd all be screwed. Sea levels would rise. It would just be mass chaos. So for a while, it was the hole in the ozone layer. Then it was acid rain. That's the one that scared me the most. I really got frightened over that one, because acid rain was the idea that all of the pollution and pollutants we were putting into the air would rise up into the atmosphere, into the cloud system, and then be rained back down on us in a really concentrated acidic form. And this idea especially disturbed me when I was younger, because I believed there would be nowhere to hide from that. Acid can eat through anything. Once it decides to rain down acid, we are all screwed. And I would just have nightmares of suddenly it raining while I'm playing outside and then my skin melting off. It was terrifying to me. It was a terrifying concept, but these were very real concepts that were being told to me as I was growing up. And each one came along with a time frame. And each time frame was very short. 5, 10, 15, or in Mr. Danson's case, 20 years. I would like to say that it's been at least 30 years since I heard Mr. Danson make that pronouncement on TV. So when global warming, quote, deniers or climate change deniers say that we don't even know what we're talking about, like we can't even label the problem correctly, what they mean is we've been through this before. It's always something. There's always something coming down the pipeline, and we're always supposed to be terrified, and then it doesn't materialize. And then we pass all these laws that restrict progress, that restrict poor people from accessing things like gas and energy, that really kind of hinder a society's progress. But we're not really solving the problem, because the problem isn't as dire as people are telling us it is. So this problem has morphed and changed and been repackaged over the years for as long as I've been alive, and I'm sure much longer. It was only a few years ago that we were talking about global warming. And this bothers me because a lot of people on the right still do this. It'll get cold somewhere, and then a bunch of people on the right will get on Twitter and be like, oh, ha ha ha, it's cold. That can't be global warming. It's like, no, okay, they've moved on from that argument. We're not talking about global warming anymore. Now we're talking about climate change. That's a broader spectrum. It's a wider term, and they don't have to be locked into any kind of temperature. So we've moved on from the global warming argument. So right-wingers, please put that down. It doesn't apply here anymore. And it's not a gotcha. We're not talking about global warming, but this is my point. That was only just a few years ago that we changed all the terminology again. And once we changed the terminology, we reset the clock on the apocalypse. And for those of us who have been alive longer than 20, 30 years, some of us anyway, we see that this cycle is just going and going and going. We're always being threatened with death. It doesn't come. So perhaps people like me are saying, is there a way we can talk about this without being absolutely apocalyptic? Is there? I believe there is. So we don't even know what to call it. And believe me, in 5-10 more years, it won't be climate change. It will be another iteration of that term. You mark my words. You save this podcast. You write this in your diary. It'll change. Because every concept gets repackaged. Every political concept gets repackaged. And I'm going to tell you why I think a lot of this stuff is politically motivated and not necessarily morally motivated. Although there's plenty of people who, like my mother, like my dear, intelligent, activist mother, who feels very strongly. There are plenty of people like her who feel very strongly about this, but she's not in charge, right? Like for the people in charge, I do think this is political, and I don't think they have any intention of ever making any progress on the climate. And I'll explain that later. So that's point number one. Point number two, I've kind of alluded to. Once you get into climate change and what we as a society, as a nation, as a country, as the earth, the globe, what we can do about it, then you get into what the bureaucracy can do about it. Because we can persuade. When I was a kid, that was the thing. My mom, and she still is, but my mom was big on making the case, and sometimes she would shame people, that was the way she persuaded people. Sometimes she would shame you for using too much plastic or using too many paper towels. She lived by example. Also, she did put in, that's why I have so much respect for her, because she has put in her work. She has walked the walk. I know, because I lived it with her. We're not talking about people who have a passion for seeing the earth and the environment around them improved. Once you start asking society as a whole to make a difference, and once you stop persuading people on your own, like my mom chose to do for other people, then it necessarily has to go to the government. And that's where I have a problem. And anyone who's listened to this podcast will know I'll always have a problem. Anytime you get the government involved in something that really should be a private enterprise, it's a disaster. And climate change policy is no different. Here is the hard, cold fact about who puts out what kind of pollution in this world. And I got news for you. The U.S. is not the biggest problem. In fact, of all the countries, of all the nations that sign on to the Paris Accord, which we have since dumped, thanks to Trump, all the nations that signed on to the Paris Accord, the United States is the only country that has actually reduced its carbon emissions. Yes, that is true. Last year, we were the only country to reduce our carbon emissions. Not even Canada did it. So there's something to be said about the value of the bureaucracy. I can't say that word. I can't even spell it, to be honest. I'm always having to go to spell check for that. But there's something to be said about government getting involved in a situation that perhaps is better handled by individual human beings. It doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. What happens is the government gets involved and they start banning things, because that's the only thing they really can do. They can ban things and they can take things. Government doesn't produce anything and government doesn't create anything. Please don't buy into any politician that tells you they're going to create jobs, whether his name is Trump or Obama or her name is Hillary or Kamala Harris or whoever. Politicians don't create jobs. They can get out of the way so that the American people can create jobs and they can get government out of the way, but they don't have any jobs to create. They have no resources of their own. All their resources are yours. So when they say they're going to take on climate change, what they're saying is, well, we're going to take more of your money to take this on. And that might sound good in theory. But once you start getting a bunch of tax money running through the government with little to no accountability, suddenly a lot of hands start getting greased. Suddenly, what's meant to get to the bottom of the chain gets held up at the top. Everybody's got to get their palms greased. Everybody's got to get their piece. And then it hampers good, honest, working hard people, particularly low income people or lower educated people. It prevents them from making progress because now our energy gets more expensive. I know we don't like gas and fossil fuels and all of that, but those are the things that have made energy cheap. Those are the things that have revolutionized Western society. Those are the very things that have made us one of the most powerful and desirable countries in the world. So the idea of poor people getting cheap energy has revolutionized society. We should not want to deny those among us who are struggling the most the right to have affordable energy, because that is a huge part of opportunity, right? If you don't have to worry about your lights being on or how you can get gas in your car, then you can worry about other things like how am I going to buy food, or, it creates a ladder that you start stepping up. But a lot of climate change policy pulls the ladder out from under a lot of people who are trying to climb it. And it makes it so that all of the resources get concentrated at the top and the people at the bottom end up scrambling and end up struggling even more. Now, I know what you're saying. I know a lot. My mom makes this argument too. I see her make it on Facebook a lot. And I think it's a fair one. Well, what do you want, Kira? Would you rather have an earth for poor people to live on eventually? Or would you just rather this all go to hell and we all die in a big fiery ball of gas? You need to preserve the earth before you can even think about addressing problems like poverty or energy consumption, whatever, stuff like that. All right, I get that. That's fair. That's fair. But let me propose this argument to you, that it's actually not the government that has made our societies cleaner. It is progress that has made our societies cleaner. And so when we hamper progress, when we deny industrial progress, economic progress, progress related to justice, any kind of progress, when we deny or when we hamper progress related to those things, we actually hamper the process that makes us cleaner. And you only need to look at the difference between countries like the United States and Canada and countries like China, Guatemala, India, countries that have huge and insane amounts of air pollution. And when we talk about all the plastics in the sea, this is important to remember too. Really, listen to me. When we talk about all the plastics in the sea, all the straws, which that isn't even an argument that was real. Some kid did a report for his 4th grade class about straws, and he worked out some math equation, and suddenly that became a talking point. Like 200 million straws lost to the ocean in a year. But that's not really based on anything except some kid's report. But let's take it at its face. Let's say he's right. They aren't coming from us. The United States and Canada actually does something with their trash. Canada, in fact, ships their trash over to poor countries, which I love. It's hilarious. Yeah, they actually just ship their problems to other people. We could be doing that too. I don't know. I don't think we are. We've got a lot of landfills in this country. But most of the trash in the oceans is coming from countries that aren't advanced. They're coming from third world countries. So they don't have societies that necessarily value those things, not because people there don't care about their world or their environment, but people there are struggling. They don't have enough bandwidth to care about what frog is swallowing what straw. They're trying to eat every day. They're trying to get shoes on their kids' feet. They're literally fighting for their lives every day. There's no reason to clean up business. There's no reason for big business to clean up its act. There's no reason for bad actors in the environmental realm to clean up their acts if the people that they serve, if their consumer base has no motivation to make them do so. If your consumer base is just only worried about day-to-day survival and doesn't have the luxury of worrying about other things, then you don't clean up your act. In places like America, In Canada, we do have those people because we live relatively very prosperous and cushy lives. So people like my mom don't have to worry about, having to send me to work in some salt mine at 5 years old just so we can put food on the table night to night. So she gets to worry about things like, well, how do I keep this earth clean for my daughter? Well, you know what? I don't like that this company dumps their oil in a river or dumps this in a river. So I'm going to make a fuss about it. I'm going to make a stink about it. I'm not going to buy their products. It's not clean. They're going to end up sickening their constituency, sickening the people they need to buy their products. And then what happens is it begins to change. And sometimes that is from people putting pressure on their local government entities, on their local companies and saying, hey, we're not voting for you or we're not buying your products until you make our lives cleaner. That's a simplification of the issue. But my point is that progress makes us cleaner. And the most progressive country in this world is America. And we are one of the cleanest countries in this world. We are. That is verifiable. It never gets said in the media. Never. People were so panicked when we didn't sign this we did, but then Trump said he was going to pull us out. People were so panicked as if the world was going to fall apart without us. But the United States is not a major contributor to the woes of climate change. Even the science backs that up. But that's not good press to say that. So no one ever mentions it. The United States can leave the Paris Accord and all those other countries can stay signed on and it won't make any bit of difference. Frankly, the whole thing is ridiculous. The whole thing can't possibly make a bit of difference. You can't sign a paper and sign away the woes of the world by signing a paper. Now, the Accord has some other provisions in it, asks countries to take more control over their carbon emissions, over their environmental policies, but it lets the people who are the worst contributors to pollution off the hook. People like China, people like India. Guess who's the biggest supporter of green energy in the United States? China. Why? Do you think they're really concerned about our environment? No, because as soon as we get off oil, then they get to monopolize the oil market, and oil is still king. Cash is king in the US, oil is king in the globe. They get to monopolize the oil market, and then they get to continue to enrich ourselves and they know that green energy is not, at this point in our progress, green energy is neither sustainable nor viable for a population of 350 million people. Not the way that it's being pitched to us right now. Solar panels, nope. Wind farms, nope. I live in California. We got wind farms everywhere. They don't power very much, but they take up a huge amount of space and they kill a lot of living creatures also. And so do the solar panels. They get really hot. They kill the birds, and they also take up a lot of space, a lot more space than, say, a nuclear power plant or even a coal one for that matter. So it's in other countries' best interest to make us less economically viable. And oil is the engine that really kind of runs the world economy. And once we voluntarily give up oil, we're giving up quite a lot of power to that engine. And the Chinese know that. So we get beholden to these standards that third world countries don't have. And we're not the polluters. We're not the problem. You can understand why a guy like Trump might say, hey, that's not fair. Plus, we're also being asked to be the biggest contributors. Oh yeah, we're supposed to be the biggest financial contributors to a problem that isn't ours, really. Since we're the ones that are actually reducing. By the way, I don't even think we're reducing it on purpose. I just think we keep progressing. And people like me out there going, hey, I don't think we should be out here just doing any old thing to the environment. Like, I don't want to get rid of the environmental crazies, as I call them. I really don't. We need all points of view because that's the game we play. That's the balance. Once one of those sides leaves, the balance is upset. We need to always be pushing and pulling each other back to the middle. So I don't want to get rid of those people. I wish there were fewer of them because they cause a lot of problems. So anyways, this is a long point I'm making, but the point is that Bureaucracy gets in the way of progress. And when you get in the way of progress, you actually get in the way of improving the environment around you. Okay, next. We don't have all the facts straight. This is not a popular view because anytime you turn on the TV, you turn on some Hollywood award show or you stop and look at the news, there is somebody saying, the science is indisputable. The science, we're at a consensus. Scientists agree. And surely scientists do agree that the climate is changing. I haven't seen any scientists, any legitimate scientists that said it's not. That would be ridiculous. That would be like a scientist saying that the sun doesn't come up in the morning. It's silly. But there are a lot of things that happen out there that get framed as one thing and then the information gets changed and it never gets shared with you. I'll give you this one little fact. I know I said I wouldn't get into this kind of the weeds on this, but I'll give you this one little fact. A lot of people out there claim that the hurricane seasons are getting worse, tornadoes are getting worse, fires are getting worse, and winter storms are getting worse. For the last 10 years, we have been told that climate change was going to increase the hurricanes that make landfall in the United States, was going to increase our winter storms, increase our droughts, increase our fire season. As it turns out, between 2005 and 2017, no major hurricane made landfall in the United States. Now, I know you're saying Hurricane Katrina, but Hurricane Katrina did not make land. What happened in Hurricane Katrina was the levees broke, and that's a whole different subject. But we didn't have this outrageous hurricane season that everyone saw coming. In fact, we've been actually had kind of a break recently until 2017. And so in the last couple of years, we've seen a few events that have been devastating, and they have been devastating. There's no doubt about it, but they haven't been unusual. But this is a fact that people just put out there. We're seeing more hurricanes. We're seeing more winter storms. We're not. We are actually not. In some cases, we're seeing fewer of those things. In some cases, we're just seeing regular old nature activity. For instance, here in California, it drives me bonkers to hear people say your fire seasons are your new normal. Well, listen to me. There's a reason why we call it a fire season. It's like winter, summer, fall, and other places that have weather. It's a season here because half of California is a desert and the other half is a forest. And we have a lot of policies that won't allow us to clear underbrush, won't allow us to clear dead and dry trees. We have a lot of environmental policies that won't allow us to prepare populated areas for the inevitable outbreak of fire. Because when you have a bunch of human beings living in one place, fire is going to break out. By the way, no one ever tells you the statistics for fires in Southern California. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fires set a year by homeless people, by homeless encampments. They're cooking outside. They're setting fires to cook their stuff or to light up their drugs, and they're setting fires. I think last year in the city of LA alone, in LA proper, I think they had something like 225 fires that were started by the homeless. So there's all kinds of reasons why you might be seeing these things that have nothing to do with what we're putting into the atmosphere. And it's the same with the winter season. I mean, when I lived in Indiana, every year we were like, this is going to be the worst winter. Global warming or climate change or whatever we're calling it today is going to bring us worse and worse snowstorms. It's going to hobble us. We've got to do something. But guess what? It snows every damn winter in Indiana, and it snows hard. We get blizzards all the time. When I was a kid, growing up in Canada, my mom just sent me a picture the other day on Facebook of a big 1982 blizzard on Prince Edward Island. The snowdrifts were 10 feet high. I'm not even lying. You can look it up. The snowdrifts were 10 feet high. We didn't go to school for 2 weeks. That was in 1982. Then in the 90s and early 2000s, that same island went through a warming period where suddenly they weren't getting as much snow as they used to have. And then, you know, a lot of people were panicked about that. And it's a small island too. So if the sea level rises too much, it can get hairy there, you know. So people were upset about that. And there was a moment or two where I was like, maybe there is an issue. But, you know, now they're back to snow, crappy weather. My point is, this is all cyclical. We don't know everything. We don't know everything about this earth. We don't even know everything about precipitation. And precipitation has the biggest effect on climate. And the science is not settled on precipitation. We're still studying it. We don't have all the facts on the ice. I bet right now you're thinking to yourself, the ice is melting. I just read an article yesterday that said the ice caps in Greenland are receding. Well, guess what? The ice caps in the Antarctica are growing. I don't know how it works. I don't know why it's like that. It is what it is. But just because you hear doom and gloom on one side doesn't mean that there's not a different point of view on the other side. It might not all be as bad as you think. It might be as bad as you think. It may very well be as bad as you think. The other thing is the earth has an amazing ability to heal itself. It really does. Now, you might call that Mother Nature. I call that God. I call him making this creation so that it can heal itself. That doesn't mean we should be actively hurting it. I'm against that. I'm a Christian, and I believe that God created this earth for us in however way you see that. Maybe he did it in 7 days. Maybe he did it through the process of 4 million years during evolution. I don't care. That's not my argument today. My point is that this is a unique creation. It's our home made for us. We can't destroy it because we didn't make it. We can hurt it. And that's why we need to be cognizant of how we treat our environment. But we don't need to hurt each other in the process of saving our environment. All right, let's move on from this one. There's no funding in combating the popular talking points of climate change. I know that this part of the subject is a little distasteful for my friends on the climate activist side, because a lot of people like to believe that people in academia have nothing but pure motives because, it's just a bunch of nerds studying things. What would they care? Why would they want to be deceptive and cheat and lie? Well, I don't think most of them do. I really don't. I think your instincts on that are right. Most of these people just want to study their work and study in the fields that they've trained to study in. But here's what happens. In order to be a scientist, in order to be a research scientist on any level, whatever you're studying, the environment, space, plastics, whatever, you need money. And that money comes from grants. It comes from grants from universities, from research corporations, and from the government. And in order to get those grants, you have to set up a hypothesis that you're going to try to prove. Well, there's going to be no government money available to somebody who wants to say, hey, I want to do a study on some of the misreported facts on the climate around us and how it's been warming or how it hasn't been warming. No government is going to give that scientist money because that's actually not in the government's interest, because the government, in order to make any kind of changes with climate or add any kind of policy or take any kind of action or grease their own palms, which is, to my view, at the end of the day, all they want to do. But in order for them to do that, they need your tax dollars. And in order for them to get your tax dollars, they need to get a study that says we're about to die. We're killing the earth. And if you don't enact this straw ban, then we're all screwed. That's the study they need to take to you and put on the measure in your next election. That needs to go to the ballot box so that the government can get your money. So that creates an environment where academics who really genuinely want to study this need to massage the numbers and need to massage some of the language so that they can argue to the government's position. So there's not a lot of money in being objective on this subject. Am I saying that all scientists are corrupt? No, but they all need money. And that means that sometimes, and I know this because I've been in nonprofit work, that means sometimes you have to massage things and you have to put a shine on them and you need to tell people what they want to hear. Listen, your government doesn't want to hear that things are getting better. Nobody does. When's the last time your government came to you and said, you know what, things are getting better. We're doing better. You guys have really cleaned this place up. Or you guys have really helped a lot of poor people. I'll take California for an example again. We've been funding homeless projects for years, probably decades, but I've only been here about a decade. But we've been funding by the billions and billions, and the homeless problem is only getting worse. I have never, ever once heard a politician in California come to the voters, come to the taxpayers and say, we did it, you guys. You approved this bond measure, and now we have solved homelessness. Now we have saved the environment. Or here are some metrics that you can look at to show you that what you have done has made this place better, cleaner, safer, whatever. Think about the last time that your government said that to you. They almost never do. In fact, the only time I can think of it is Donald Trump going on the air and telling everybody that the economy's better. That's the most recent example I can think of a politician actually saying things are getting better. Do you think it's because we never do anything better? Gosh, we've got to have done something right. Look at all the money and energy we've poured into these subjects, into these causes. We've got to be doing something right. At some point, someone's got to come forward and say, yes, we have done it. But you never hear that. That's because there's no value in that for the government. There's no forward motion in that. The government's always going to want a bigger piece of your pie. That's just how it works. That's just how it works. And I'm sorry that if you really believe that everyone in government has your best interest in mind. But I've been doing this job long enough to know that it's actually the opposite. Very few people in government have your best interests in mind. It's just kind of another business. And that doesn't mean you have to distrust government, but you just, got to be on your P's and Q's, be realistic about it. So that's why I think a lot of people who are on the climate, I hate to use the word denier because that, again, I have proved my point that that's not what these people are saying. But a lot of people who are on the non-hysterics side of the fence, that's why they say you can't give government this much control over the things around you, because at the end of the day, it's just going to add up to more. Government never solves any problems. And that's not just a talking point. Again, please ask yourself the last time government solved a problem. Okay. Moving on, we're coming towards the end here. We are not a disease. Human beings are not a disease. I really do think that a lot, not everybody, but a lot of the climate change hysteria is rooted in the culture of death. We live in a culture of death. We seem to glorify death these days. I mean, there's certainly no shortage of news about shootings around the world, and of course here in the US, and there are all kinds of issues surrounding that. I do have an episode on the Second Amendment. If you'd like to go back and listen to that on gun control, it's on my Just Listen to Yourself page on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this podcast. So we know we have issues like growing depression, growing suicide rates, more support for things like abortion, which really robs us of our future, in my opinion. We have growing support for legal euthanasia. We have growing support for using violence to solve our problems. The more we've taken out traditional beliefs from our society, particularly, I believe, a belief in a higher creator, the bigger vacuum we've created. And a vacuum is always going to get filled. But if you don't have an author of life, something that you can look to say, this is where I get life. This is what gives me a higher purpose to serve my fellow beings. If you don't have that, then the human's default position is death. I'll take you to church for a second here, and that's why we needed Jesus. He had to come save us from ourselves because we were marching towards death. It's our natural state. Our natural state is sin. So we live in a culture of death. You don't even have to believe in religion the way I do to understand that. You see it all around you. And hell, it's in your media. It's in the movies you watch. It's in the music you listen to. I believe that a lot of the climate change hysteria is rooted in this culture of death, this idea that we are all just one step away from death and that somehow we deserve it. It's almost self-loathing. It's almost self-hating. You'll see a lot of climate change activists say we need to reduce the population. which sounds fine, I guess, if you're just having a chat at the dinner table. But where do we start with that? Who do we get rid of first? Oh, well, we don't need to get rid of people. We just need to sterilize people so that they're not having as many kids. We need to change the law so they don't have as many kids. All right, where do we start? Who do we start with? I have a guess about where you'd like to start. You can go back and listen to my abortion episode for more on what that guess is. But typically it's not with them. And typically it's not with the communities that they sojourn in. I do believe that there is kind of this maudlin idea that we're just all one step away from death, that we're the problem on this planet. But see, I don't believe that. I don't believe that humans are a disease. And I don't believe that the earth is just here and then we just appeared and we're ruining every pristine thing on the earth. This is our home. We belong here. The things that are here for us are here to make our lives better. Let me take oil for an example. I always say this. We're always looking for alternative energy because oil's dirty, oil causes wars, oil causes pollution, whatever. We're always looking for an alternative to oil. But oil is the only element that we use that isn't used for anything else except fuel. Fuel to build things or fuel to create things. So it goes into plastics, right? But it's not, you don't eat oil. You don't drink oil. You don't give oil to your kids to keep them from getting diseases. Oil is, the very specific use of oil is production. It's almost like it was created just for us. It has no other use. But water does. So what happens when we start messing around with our water supplies? Start making things that run on water. I mean, I live in a state where people are telling me I'm just days away from the next drought, So water dries up, sunlight doesn't last. There's such a thing called nighttime. Corn, look at what we've done with supporting ethanol. Ethanol is a waste of time and it sucks up millions of dollars in funding every year. But on top of that, it reduces the corn supply because farmers get paid more to farm corn for ethanol than they do to farm corn for the market. So what does it do? It drives up the price of corn on the market. Well, guess what happens when corn's expensive? Your beef's more expensive, your chicken's more expensive, your vegetables are more expensive. Corn fuels a lot of our food table. So you start driving up the price of corn. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, it's almost as if this was created for us because I believe that that's what it was. That it's a gift, just like I believe potatoes are a gift. It's like the perfect vegetable. It's sustaining you. It's easy to grow and you can use it for so much. Potatoes and eggs. Oh my gosh. Perfect. The perfect food. Eggs are such perfect protein that to this day, we still measure our daily protein based on the protein of an egg. These are perfect things, perfect gifts given to us. We are not invaders on this earth. This earth is our home and we are making it our home. Now, that is exactly why I think we should be very careful to take good care of it. And I am in favor of some policies that keep us clean, that keep us cleaner. I'm in favor of talking about these things. I'm in favor of picking up trash on the beach. I'm in favor of not running your car all day long and letting all those fumes seep into the environment. I'm in favor of turning off the lights when you're not using them and saving that energy. Of course, we should absolutely 100% be taking care of this earth and our environment around us because it is a gift, because it was given to us. But once you start looking at us as the problem, that's self-loathing, that's self-hate. And humanity cannot operate on that because you know what happens when we start hating ourselves? We turn that hate outward and we turn it towards each other, which is what I see happening with the climate change debates on both sides. I don't like that we have made this little girl, Greta Thunberg, some kind of representative for climate change. I think it's dangerous to put a child out front on an adult conversation and make them entertainment, because that's what she is. She's entertainment. And once you start letting children entertain adults and get paid for it, there's a lot of problems come in. So I don't like it. I don't like that the left does that, makes her some kind of saint, and they really have. But I don't like it when the right makes fun of her and ridicules her and calls her names and calls her silly. She's a child. She's not doing any of this on her own, no matter what she might be saying at her press conferences. She's not doing this all by herself. Let her go. Concentrate on the issue, but she does not deserve your wrath. But I was watching her speech and I was watching how desperate she was. And she's scared. And I know because I was her, because that's how I felt. I was scared. I told you the story about for years being scared of the rain and having nightmares about walking outside and having my face melted off. I get it, because the people you trust the most are telling you that we have literally years to live. And that's scary when the adults in your life are telling you that. You have to believe it. What else can you believe? It makes us, her, you, me, an object of hate. And we should not hate each other. We should not hate ourselves, because that makes us hate each other. We should understand that this is our home. It's been given to us to live in, to enjoy, and to prosper in. And that's how I look at the earth. We are not a disease. And every climate change policy I've seen has really painted us as such. And I don't look at people as diseases. I don't look at human beings as diseases, and neither should you. Last point. Hypocrites. I think a lot of people on the right, I guess I'll start using right and left on this language because I think it's the best thing to do. So I'll say a lot of people on the right have a big problem with the hypocrisy of climate change activists on the left, because a lot of them will say one thing and do another, and it almost becomes an elitist thing. I'll take Leonardo DiCaprio, for example, and all of his rich friends who support climate change policy. They're very big environmentalists. Leo famously showed up at the Golden Globes one year in a Prius. But Leo also has a private jet, and he flies dozens of people around the world dozens of times a year on his private jet. And the Google just held a climate conference in, I think, Malta. And Leo was there, and Katy Perry was there, and Orlando Bloom, and like all the stars you can name. And how many metric tons of fuel do you think they all use to get over there? What we see when we see climate change activists saying, you need to drive less, you need to travel less, we're too addicted to oil. What we hear you saying is, we deserve these things, but you don't. So Al Gore deserves to have a carbon footprint with his 12,000 square foot mansion, of which he owns, several in different spots. He's allowed to have that. But you deciding that you want to have a single family home in the suburbs rather than live in centralized housing in an urban area, you saying that, well, you're wasting space. It makes us the problem and them the solution. And that's a recipe for elitism. And that's a recipe for self-loathing. And it creates tears. It creates class struggle. And I see that happening on the left a lot. No one ever thinks about the people at the bottom who are going to have to bear the burden of these policies you're protesting for. Leo will still get to fly his jet and drive all his fancy cars, and once in a while he'll put a ribbon on his suit and he'll go make a speech about how climate change is so important. But the rest of us will be expected not to take trips on Thanksgiving to see our family because we're wasting fuel. We're adding to the carbon footprint. The rest of us will be expected to use less energy, to not heat our homes to 70 degrees in the winter, or to not cool our homes in the summer. The rest of us will be asked to sit and sweat it out in the heat of a Southern California summer. But do you think Leo DiCaprio is sweating it out? Hell, do you think Greta Thunberg is sweating it out? No, everybody, we all do this, by the way. Everybody does this in some way in their lives. It's hypocrisy. Rules for thee, but not for me. Who do you think is made to bear the burden of this? Any celebrity or billionaire or millionaire who tells you, I'm happy for my taxes to go up to save the climate, just know that they do not have to wait for their taxes to be raised to, quote, save the climate. The IRS has an option for you to send in extra taxes every tax season. It's right there on your form, whichever form you use. Go look it up on the IRS. If you want to send extra tax money because you really feel committed to that position, then you can do it. No one is stopping Warren Buffett from sending in extra money on his tax returns. No one. But no one's doing that. Of course not. They want you to do that. But the thing is, your paycheck is much more valuable to you than theirs is to them, because they already have their money. They've already taken advantage of the forward progress in this country to get to where they are. Now they want to stop the forward progress, and you can just stay where you are. Your life can get more expensive, but you can't really get a grasp on more income because everything's getting more and more and more expensive. Trying to keep up with all these policies, these new taxes, these new programs. That doesn't affect them. It feels like hypocrisy. So it's hard to take people seriously when they're saying things like, you people over there are supposed to do with less. Not us, you. And that's a lot of what I see coming from the celebrity side of the climate change argument. So I think a lot of people have a problem with that kind of hypocrisy. Because listen, I'll end it here because I'm starting to lose my voice a little here. All right, listen to this. We've been told in the last year or two, that the earth has 12 more years. We've got 12 more years before we reach the point of no return. In fact, at the end of 12 years, we actually may have it may be all over. We've just destroyed the earth. It'll just have warmed up too much or cooled off or whatever the threat is. Then that number got reduced to, I think, 18 months. So now we're 18, and this was a couple months ago. Now we're 18 months out from irreversible change. And that's a number that Greta uses a lot. And I think we're down to a year now. And that's not saying that the earth will end in a year, but just that everything will be irreversible after that. So the timeline is looking tight and scary, you know? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says a lot that this is a climate emergency. We need to do something now because we are in a state of emergency. And little Greta has said that. And you saw her crying in front of the UN, giving that very moving speech. I was moved by it. I really was. I was more moved by the fact that she was so scared, and I just wanted to comfort her and say, honey, we're all going to be here in 15 years. God willing that, no accidents happen to you or anyone, but the earth is still going to be here. But anyways, let's stipulate that the AOCs of the world and the climate hysterics of the world are right. Let's stipulate that Angela Merkel, the leader of Germany, is right that we only have 12 months to save the earth. That is an emergency, isn't it? That is absolutely an emergency. We are talking about the survival of the human race. So do you mean to tell me that the survival of the human race is going to depend on a bill getting passed through the United States House of Congress? That's all it's going to come down to? Donald Trump signing on to an accord, which is just a piece of paper? That's what it's going to come down to? No. If we were doomed, if we knew that a nuclear bomb that could consume the whole earth was going to detonate in exactly 18 months, that would absolutely be an emergency. And what would we do? We would change everything about everything in order to focus on disarming that nuclear bomb. Now, all the politicians and the celebrity activists want to tell you that's what we need to be doing. We need to be focusing on diffusing this bomb. We have to. But if Angela Merkel really believes that Germany is going to be no more in 12 months, then why doesn't she declare martial law? Why doesn't she shut off the power in Germany? Why don't all the other world leaders who believe this to be true do that? Why don't they ground every plane, siphon out all the gas from every car, make people walk, make people ride bicycles? Why don't they turn off the electricity in every country? Why don't they declare literal war on this? Why don't they lock us down, tell us to stay in one place, tell us to stop producing things for, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever we need to reverse this process? If we are months away from a nuclear bomb going off, then this is war. And then these governments need to lock down their stuff. which would mean locking down our progress and our free lives to do that. But if the future of the human race is on the line, then that's what they would do. Why don't they do it? Because the future of the human race is not on the line. And they know it. This is all politics. There are people like my mom out there who are true believers and genuine activists who truly care. But my mom doesn't run Germany, and she doesn't run Canada or the United States. The reason why these politicians don't act is because they know the truth. They know that this isn't really that big of a problem. But they don't get your money, and more importantly, they don't get America's money for their Paris Accords and to fund their other initiatives. God only knows where all the money goes and who it goes to. They don't get our money if they don't create a certain level of hysteria. They've got to make people demand to be voluntarily robbed. So that's what they have to do. Honest to God, people. If it was that serious, if we're dead in 12 months, then lock it down, shut off the electricity, take every car away, and make every person sit where they are for the next 12 months. If it's that serious, it is not that serious. Is it serious? I don't even know if it's serious, to be honest. Is it important? Yes, it is important because, again, this is our home. And whenever we make progress and when we make things cleaner, we make things better for everyone. So I'm for progress. I'm for lifting people up out of their poverty and giving them a chance to concentrate on things other than just putting food on their table every single day. And we do that by making economic progress. And we make economic progress when we keep government as far away from our private activities as possible. And when the government stays as far away from our private activities as possible, we are freer to create, to buy, to sell, to improve. We are nowhere near a climate disaster. Mark my words, the language will change on this in 5 to 10 years. We might be just a couple years out from the language changing. What happens in 12 months when we're still here? What happens in 18 months when we're still here? Will the timeline be readjusted? Or will little Greta or Angela Merkel or Justin Trudeau come out and say, you guys, we did it. We did it. We pulled together and things are better. We can still be getting better, but things are better. We're no longer in danger. Do you think that that's what they're going to tell you? That we're no longer in danger? No, they're just going to change the timeline. All right. This is why I think that the climate change hysteria has gone too far and we don't need to be so concerned about it. Please, if this is your pet issue, you feel strongly about it, you feel strongly about saving your environment, and those are the subjects you donate to or the places you donate to, great. By all means, it takes all kinds of people in this society. Love you. We need you. That's important. But we should not be scaring our children into thinking they're going to be dead in 12 years. Do you know what that does to an entire generation when you've told them and educated them from the classroom? We're doing this in the classrooms. You're educating them every day that they have 12 years to live. That means you're taking their future away. That's why little Greta was crying. She's scared. She thinks she doesn't have a future. Do you know what that does to a generation? It's crippling. And we will see the results of what we're doing to this generation in another 20 years. When they're not forward thinking, they don't have vision. They don't have forward vision because they've been raised to believe that there is no future. That's a terrible thing to do to little kids. Stop doing it. Stop getting them involved. Teach them good manners and good stewardship, but don't scare the babies. Don't scare the babies. Okay, that's my argument for why I don't think climate change is something to be necessarily hysterical about. Thank you so much for listening to my persuasion. I guess it's kind of persuading. We'll see who I persuaded. But thanks so much for taking the time to listen to the podcast. I'm sorry if I sound congested and crazy. Just, it's that time of year and I've just been getting over this cold. I do appreciate your listens. Listen, hit me up and let me know what you think of this. If you've got an opinion, if you think I'm wrong and you would like to share your side of the story, hit me up on my email. It is kiradavis422@gmail.com. That's Kira, Kira Davis422@gmail.com. Don't ask me why I have that 422 at the end. I'm an idiot. And when we first started doing email, I thought it was going to be a trend and I didn't think very carefully about my name. And I've just had it forever, but it's the email count that I can communicate with you guys with over. So you can use that, or you can hit me up on Twitter at realkiradavis, or if you go to Facebook and type in at realkiradavis, my public page will pop up. Join that and get in on some of the other discussions going on. Thank you so much to our home at FCB Network. Thank you so much to our listeners. And until next time, folks, remember, just take a little time every now and then and stop and listen to yourself. Peace.